Let's take a look at the Oklahoma standards that you will need to be familiar with, particularly those for social studies. Now, as we go to the State Department for Education site here, sde.ok.gov, there are different ways to access the standards. I usually go to services and then it's the very first entry. So on academic standards, then we can go here to the main page to find what we need, in this case, social studies. We can also access this way, and notice that these are Oklahoma academic standards from 2019. So this is the most recent version of the standards that are available to us on here. We can click on this, and now we find this whole wonderful section of resources related to the standards. First of all, let's look at the organization. And easy access here is to click on this image. And that takes us directly to the document, which is 86 pages. And of course, you don't have to access all of that all the time, but it is good to be familiar with the organization and know what it is you're looking for and where to look. Our table of contents shows us the introduction and the practices here, and then begins with the grade level, and then by content area within the high school standards. You may want to read through this sometime to get an overview of it. This gives us an overview of the content strands, the 4 strands that we look at through the OAS. And you may remember that for the lessons that you're going to be teaching, we have these 4 strands, as well as the culture strand. And you'll see how that's embedded through here as well. Then we have the practices overview that we see throughout the grade levels. And we see the first 3 that have to do with the civics and democratic process, and then analyzing authentic civic issues, evaluating evidence, and then reading and interpreting information, and evidence-based writing. Notice that these are all overlapping with our language arts standard as well. We want students to be able to read maps, to use economic information, to collect data and be able to use that data, and then engage in evidence-based writing. So they're drawing conclusions, they're sharing their opinions based on the information that they have gathered and evaluated. Now we can look ahead to page 21. We're going to look at 5th grade. Just for fun, we'll look at the 5th grade standards and how they're organized. Over here, we have what's referred to as the actual standards. And you know what? I jumped ahead a little bit. I'm going to go back, and there's something I neglected to show you after this. You will want to look through these a little more in depth. But then this page here is particularly helpful because it shows how for each grade level we can read the information that's available to us. We see the 5 practices across here and the grade level or the course. But over here in the blue, we have the standards. These are the overarching standards that are going to be used within the grade level that we're looking at. Since in elementary, we're focusing on grade levels rather than more specific, such as Oklahoma standards or world government. Then over here, we have what they call the objectives. I struggle with this term because an objective or a goal is something that we should be able to accomplish in a class period, for example. And here, these are so broad as describe the Constitution of the U.S. as the structure for our national government. Well, that's not something that can very easily be done in a class period. So while these are referred to as objectives, I often personally refer to them as the substandards, because when we talk in class about writing objectives, writing goals, we're talking about something that can be done in one bite using one measurable verb. And we'll talk more about measurable verbs later on, but these are too broad to be able to do that. Notice that 2.2.2 has to do with absolute and relative locations using latitude and longitude. This relates to one of your social study content collection entries. Now we're going to jump back to the 5th grade standards to page 21. And we see our standards over here. The first one has to do with the settlements, Jamestown and Plymouth, as foundations of early American culture. And then we see within that what are referred to as the objectives, I refer to as the content standards. It's just important that you understand what the difference is between these very broad ones and the ones that we use more specifically in writing lesson plans. For example, look at 5.1.3. Explain the economic and political motivations of immigrants and indentured servants who came to Virginia. Our 5th graders then are learning quite a bit about the early foundations of American, and then here we get culture and society. And if you remember, that's the 5th strand that we're looking at in the peer lessons that you're doing. Down here, we have analyzed religious, economic, political motivations for immigrants as well as indentured servants. This would be something of a unit rather than just a one class period lesson that would be done. Now, continuing to look at 5th grade, we have 5.1, and then here we have 5.2, comparing developments in the New England colonies, the middle and the southern colonies, and then 5.3, foundations established during the Revolutionary era, the 1770s, and 5.4, following the American Revolution, so after the 1770s, and then the last one for 5th grade, structure and responsibilities of American system of government and the role of the individual citizens. So we have our civics embedded in here, and notice that we have responsibilities of citizens, and then we look at the 3 branches of government, and we examine the key principles of the government. If you are looking for a lesson that has to do with, let's say that you want to teach about a country in the Eastern Hemisphere, then 5th grade would not be the best grade level for accomplishing that. That would be more along with 7th grade, where the standards relate more directly to the Eastern Hemisphere. Now we're going to go back to the social studies page and look at some of the resources that are available on here. We have our content here with the curriculum framework, which we are going to come back to. We have Constitution Day, which is in the fall, Celebrate Freedom Week, and then other links and resources. And down here, we have some very specific information, very specific resources that go along with the regular Oklahoma academic standards. These all supplement that. Celebrate Freedom Week, related to Veterans Day in schools, professional development, grants, if you're looking for some kind of a grant or a fellowship to do. These are some good resources, but I'll tell you that in social studies, there are many other grants and fellowships available there. Then we have Oklahoma history and culture links. We see many of the museums, and Native Knowledge 360 is with the NMAI, the National Museum of the American Indian, for which we will have a presentation in one of our virtual museum tours. Here we have the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, Oklahoma Indian Education Resources, Tulsa Race Massacre Commission, Tulsa Historical Society, just a whole multitude of resources here, and then many geographical resources, including some that have some kinds of games in them. U.S. history resources. Look at all of these museums here. In fact, if you had not selected a museum yet, this is another place that you could look to try to find one that you would like to share with the class. And world history. Now, like I said, we're going to look more specifically at the curriculum frameworks. The frameworks go along with the academic standards, and they are developed to give you some more specific information, such as resources, but also how to frame things, how to help set things up for your courses. Let's again look at 5th grade. We'll take the 5th grade framework. And then here's an explanation of what 5th grade social studies covers in general. Over here, we have some of the practices, what things that the students are doing as they are developing into literate citizens. Sample unit progressions. These can be very helpful. Learning progressions that can show you the order in which some schools may use this. They may have pacing guides or they may not, but this gives you an idea of how long might this growth of the American colonies? 9 weeks. And so here are essential questions and then supporting questions that lead into the essential questions, which then feed into the driving questions. So where we looked at the substandards, where I said that they were much too big to really be the actual objectives, that's what this is referring to, because they need to be broken down into much more specific pieces for that. And here we see that the Constitution takes 3 weeks, constitutional principles and government takes 6 weeks. This is certainly not saying that you have to go by this, but it's a guide available in case you would like to have that kind of information available. And then some examples of engagement strategies. Student-centered strategies. We have a whole table of contents here. You can look these up for the grade level that you're interested in teaching. If we want them to participate in civil discourse, we can do a debate team carousel, for example. And then this will give us directions on how we might accomplish that. The engagement strategies, this is probably the most fun piece in here because it gives you directions for each one of these. And here we go, analysis of written evidence and ways that we can accomplish that without just doing the same kind of activity over and over, the same kind of writing. Evaluating visual evidence. And this ties into your language arts standards as one of the language arts. And then down here we have reading and noting, roll cards, summarizing. Do all 5th graders know how to summarize? No. Do all college students know how to summarize? No. It's a skill that some people do naturally and others really struggle with it. So here's an example of using the Cornell method to take notes. An example of what it looks like and using the 5 R's of note taking. For example, I encourage you to take some time and explore the site, become familiar with some of the grade levels that you are interested in teaching, and then you'll be able to use those as we continue through some of our coursework and develop inquiry lessons. So enjoy, and I hope this has been helpful for you.